Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This episode is brought to you by Starry. When you drink Starry Lemon Lime Soda, every sip is a win. Perfect for game time or anytime. It's a crisp, refreshing lemon lime soda that's caffeine-free and bursting with flavor that makes you go, ah. Starry hits different. Find it in stores or online today.
Alarm, alarm. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. Yes, we're sticking to alarm, alarm.
Yeah, I like it. I like
it. I think what we've done there is after 700 episodes, 701 episodes, is we've done one of those rebrands.
Maybe we need a completely new look as well.
Should we get someone to spend £250,000 on designing a logo?
Yeah. It's a variation of us in jackets. Grinning from a tank.
Just a different tank. Because, it's time to refresh the tank, Jim.
It's trying to face new challenges. We're in a Firefly. We need to be in a Cromwell, clearly. Anyway, listen, congratulations. You've finished your run. You had a triumphant final show on Saturday. Well done. It's a hell of an achievement.
Yeah, we started on May the 29th or something.
Holy moly.
It's a long time ago. And I've had a curious morning of thinking, well, I don't need to think about that. I just don't need to think about it anymore. I don't
need to forget all the lines.
I can forget the lines. What I also don't have to do is, figure out how I'm getting to the next place. Am I going to Airbnb, get the train, get the car? And now I also need to sit down and actually grasp the nettle of writing a new stand-up show and this book.
Yeah, but that's fun. You can have a bit of time at home. Remember what Eleanor and Daisy look like and all those sort of things. And are you feeling a bit Mob happy then, post-COVID as well?
I am actually. And yes, I am recovered. Although people can hear I'm quite husky because we did 2 final shows on the Saturday. Wow. Which was great to get back, but during which I basically blew my voice out completely. So anyway, but you have been... you've been getting to grips with the business of foal boating and stuff, right?
Yes. I've been down we had the training weekend, and all I can say is thank God we had the training weekend before doing our SBS paddle adventure in Scotland later on this month. So the plan is to go from Ardrossan to Oban, which is 61 nautical miles. Never say miles, it's nautical miles. And we now only speak in terms of knots and wave strength and wind strength and all that kind of stuff. And we now know about ebbing tides and flows.
How much bigger is a nautical mile than a mile?
Not by much.
Because they're bigger, aren't they?
They're bigger.
Yeah, or they're longer, aren't they?
Yeah, but you can, in theory, it's sort of easier, isn't it? Because, it's sort of as a crow flies, sort of.
Yeah. Yes, in theory. Yes,
in theory, although we've done an awful lot of wobbling around.
Yeah, tides and currents have different ideas.
But it's quite a thing because, these foal bots, they really do absolutely break down into nothing. They're just genius. And we're being led by a former Royal Marine commando called Lee Waters, who's just fantastic. He's got just the right level of he's laid back, but because he was, a senior NCO for 20 years and has got lots of experience, including scars of a bullet hole in his face. When he just turns up the notch just half, you just stop immediately. Yesterday he told me off for throwing my glove onto the beach. He said, Jim, in a wind in Scotland, that's gone. Always keep it about you. So, okay. Learn that lesson.
Right.
So he's incredibly genial. He's brilliant. He's just one of those guys you just trust immediately.
Yeah.
And there was a whole load of other various armed forces guys who were preparing for this they're doing a big paddle this week up in Scotland. I think they're doing more like 120 miles.
Yeah.
And then they run in with their boats for the last bit.
Right.
Having broken them down and put them into cases.
Yeah.
But it's quite a thing. They're quite a thing because, they're still the olive drab canvas. And, I think the ones we were in mine was called crayfish as well.
Right. Okay. Oh, well, that's good. That's very strong.
So, but I tell you what, the technique is quite a thing. I sort of only really got to grips with it I don't know, an hour and a half in yesterday, I'd say. of what the kind of technique is, and I wasn't leaning forward enough because it feels really good. You want to lean backwards,
Right.
but you actually need to lean forwards, and it's quite a thing.
Engage your core, so to speak.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah. But weirdly, no blisters at all. No blisters.
Right.
I cut my hand on a muscle, edge of a muscle.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot of blood. Glad there wasn't any sharks around.
Yeah, and was the sauce what were they? Mariniere or what?
Avec frite. Yeah. Straight from the Gironde, yeah.
Poach yourself in the eye with a chip, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, first end of first day was quite tiring because, you sort of, I got down there about 8:30. Then we all had to go to Weatherspoons, obviously, and drink lots of pints and sort of crap food. And finally got back. I was absolutely blowing a hoolie on Friday night.
Yeah.
I had to put up my little 2-man tent.
Right.
In the wind.
But
because we were all such team members, everyone came and helped. So that was good.
Well, that's good.
I had sort of Ben Wilbond and Rob Gallimore kind of both kind of, and Saul all kind of, putting in pegs at the right place and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was, it was freaking freezing. It was absolutely freezing. I suddenly thought I need to kind of up my game with my sleeping bag before I go to Scotland.
Yeah.
So, you're not sleeping very much. Then it was up really early the next morning. It was freezing cold. And the day was hard because the wind was so bad. And I tell you what, it makes you realise paddling around in winter in high winds in the Atlantic, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. We were, at one point, there was a bit, because we went down to Chivenna, which is sort of near Barnstaple and Appledore. So the river sort of flows, River Tar, I think it is, flows westwards. And then there's all these sort of sandbars and stuff, and it turns north. It sort of turns northwards, and you head up towards sort of Saunton Sands and Croyd.
Yeah,
where the river kind of comes out into the main part of the sea, there's sandbars.
Yeah,
and there's a really big wind. So the net result is you've got the sort of flow of the river and the tide and everything hitting one another.
Yeah,
and made worse by the wind. So we were at a kind of force 4, nearly 5.
Yeah. And these boats draw nothing, right?
No, it was really, really good fun, but it was quite kind of
hairy,
teeny bit. You didn't feel scared because you're kind of with Lee and with the other kind of RM guys who kind of, you just know that they've got your back. But
yeah, and are you being followed by a launch?
No,
in case,
no, none of that. None of that. But it's quite, you are being sloshed, and suddenly the bow of the boat pitches down, and you're sloshed over with water.
Yep.
And you've got these kind of skins that sort of go around you, but they don't really, we hadn't really put them on properly, so they didn't really work. So you're taking on quite a lot of water.
Mm.
And then there was a bit when we were coming back again. And again, it was the tide was just starting to turn and it was meeting the river.
Yeah.
So it's just like you're just paddling really hard for nothing. And they were all talking about the mouth of the Gironde, more of which in a minute.
Yeah.
For Operation Frankton.
Yeah.
And you suddenly understood why that is so treacherous.
Yep.
And then yesterday it was kind of, beautiful weather, but it's all about tides and it's all about flow. And, when you're with the tide, you can do 6 knots, no problem at all.
But the minute that changes,
you're going kind of
backwards.
You're going backwards. You're literally busting your ass to do kind of 1 knot.
Yeah, and the wind will ensure you're going backwards too. If you've got wind over tide, then you're really,
And at that moment, it's absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
And really frustrating. My big problem was that it's just getting in and out. It's just...
Well, you see, I think this is one of the really interesting things because Saul David's with you, isn't he? And he wrote that book about the SBS or the SBSs or whatever.
Yes.
Because after all...
Or the RMBPD.
Or there's or the COP survey people. There's no such thing as the SBS essential, or there are several, or there isn't one, or, it's like one of those... It's sort of, it's almost like
people in boats.
But it's almost like a sort of theological question, the existence of the SBS during the Second World War. There's proof of its existence. But anyway, but I thought one of the points he makes is, and in fact, and actually also talking to the guys who did the, had the canoes at We Have Waves Fest, the familiarity of these canoeists, of these guys with their canoes, they're just jumping in and out of them. They're completely familiar with them in a way that, I mean, you've done your weekend's training, but in a way that you won't ever be, that you're not in boats the whole time, all the time, all day, every day, all weathers, all climes, all possible situations. So
I think that's a fair point, actually. And actually Lee and Rob, who was also, that they had their own kind of bespoke made one-man kayaks.
Yeah.
which they kind of already kind of paddled all around. They paddled across a channel. They've done they paddled all around Britain kind of 8 times, across the Irish Sea, all this kind of stuff. And everything about that boat is perfect for Lee. He knows exactly where everything is. He's worked out over the years the absolute minimum of what he requires, but no extra. And he's got everything he needs. And he just gets in and out. But I mean, if I was to get into that, I'd probably capsize immediately. It's a bit like kind of, a single sculling, double sculling, what do you call it? A single skull. It's very, very narrow.
Yeah. Well, it's like riding a bike. I mean, literally, isn't it? And these guys are the people who went on the Cockleshell raid. They knew exactly what they were doing with boats. They were totally familiar with them, which makes what then happens even kind of worse. We're going to talk about Frankton, but I read Saul's book, and I was messaging at the time, telling Archers enjoying it, but I was essentially disgusted by the entire thing. Like it's appalling. Anyway,
well, needless to say, in the heritage of the Royal Marine Commandos, it's very much put on a very, very high pedestal.
Well, and I can and the thing is, I can completely see why, but there are elements of it where you just think, oh my God, like what?
Yeah.
How have you ended up essentially in this situation? Is the thing. How has this happened?
A touch of Hopkinson going on.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And anyway. Should we talk about Frankton then?
Let's talk about Frankton. Because it's such an interesting raid. But I just can't tell you how much my mind is buzzing with that operation, having done this weekend and knowing what I'm going to do in a couple of weeks' time. It just, God, talk about experiential research. It really opens your minds. I mean, I am seriously stiff today.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And when I got out of the car, when I got home from Devon last night, I could literally hardly lift my leg off the onto the kind of, onto the clutch. I mean, it was... Well,
I'm going to, before we go any further, they were a lot younger than you, Jim.
Yeah. And actually, I think there's 5 of us, actually, because there's Mike as well, who's come along, who's sort of filming it, which is quite fun. We're going to do it for SAFA as well, which is,
brilliant.
Good cause.
Superb.
So we've got our Just Forgiving page all set up. But yeah, so we're 5 of us. And I think we were all kind of pretty similar. I think Mike's a bit younger than us, but Ben... Saul's a bit older. He's like 55, I think. Ben's 50, Rob's 50, I'm 53. So we're all similar sort of age. And actually, I think we'll be sort of held up fitness-wise, just about.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of daunted by Scotland, but I'm not thinking, holy moly, I'm never going to do it.
No, of course, good. Well,
and you just feel a little bit more manly doing kind of rough camping and stuff. You just do. There's no privations. I mean, there's no, that's not the word. There are lots of privations. So it's all a bit rough and ready, Washing up the porridge pot with your hand.
I mean, I feel more manly just drinking in Wetherspoons. So,
getting past the bouncers of Barnstaple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So Operation Frankton, which people will know as the Cockleshell Heroes raid, because after all, one of the interesting things about this is it got immortalised, and it's had a film made about it and all that sort of stuff, which I think is, which after all, and a 50s war film in black and white. So it very much sits in the Tales of Pluck pantheon of British war movies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, although it's one of those films where it's lots of paddling. Well, I mean, how many hours straight did you paddle maximum? What?
Well, we were out on the water at 8:30 yesterday, and we got back at 3:30.
Right.
And we had about an hour and a half off at Saunton Stands while we were waiting for the tide to turn. And what you do is you paddle for a bit, and then you kind of pause and just rest up for a bit out at sea.
Yeah.
But actually, the last stretch was 2.5 hours, and I've got to say that was, by the about an hour before that, I was thinking I'm done with today. I can't be bothered to do this anymore. But it was quite hard. What was quite funny was I was partnered up with Ben, and Ben and I spent most of the weekend talking like that very calm bomber pilot. There's that BBC archive.
Yeah.
Bombs away, skipper. Well done, navigator. All that sort of stuff. So Ben would go now, mounting now. Have mounted. This is so funny. And I'd say things like, hard to port 115, please, navigator. he was on the rudder.
Yeah.
It was just very funny. And the more I was just sort of thinking about it. I was sort of paddling up the river. I was just thinking about all those bomber crews.
Yeah.
Who really did talk like that.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And just unspeakably calm, despite Lancasters falling all around them, and flak bursting, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Careful on the starboard wing, flak alert.
Well, I suppose because I remember listening to there's some first Gulf War recordings that I remember hearing, where basically the RAF pilots are doing that. The Tornado pilots are going approaching target, 200 feet, like that. Stand by weapons or whatever.
Yes.
And then the contrasting American pilots going, "Oh my God, they're firing at us!" And all this sort of thing, like completely
steel bone struck.
Exactly, completely different, like cultural approach to the thing. But
all that was very funny.
That's great, Jim.
That certainly made me laugh. Anyway.
Right, but the story of Frankton comes at us via,
Well, it's Hasler's idea. It's Blondie Hasler. So we should talk about Blondie Hasler very quickly.
Let's talk about Blondie Hasler.
Blondie Hasler, Herbert Blondie Hasler. And he's called Blondie because obviously he's got blonde hair. And he's got one of those sort of 1980s moustaches that all squaddies serving in Ireland and Falklands had, but don't really have anymore. But he had one obviously in 1942. So he's born in Dublin in 1914. He's the son of an army lieutenant, and he's massively into sailing and boats and all the rest of it. And he makes his own canoe as a nipper.
Yeah,
from plans from a boy's own paper. And he's in Norway, isn't he? And then he joins the Commandos when they're formed. No, he's already in the Commandos. That's right, he's already in the Commandos. And then he comes up with these ideas because he's so obsessed with canoes and kayaks. So he is a bit like George Hopkinson, who, for those of you who've listened to previous podcasts, will know that he's the guy behind the glider.
Yeah,
the glider regiment. And
well, yes, he's the first commanding officer of 1st Airborne Division, and he's the
first Airborne, but he's obsessed with gliders.
He's completely obsessed with gliders. He thinks that's the way to do it, and it's part of the power struggle between the glider and the parachute people and all that.
So anyway, so there's a touch of Hopkinson about Hasler. So he's obsessed with kayaking and thinks that the great thing about them is that once you're kind of absolutely au fait with a kayak, you can go anywhere, do anything, and you can get in. More importantly, you can get in really, really close silently.
Yep.
And so he comes up with this idea to create what is known as the Royal Marines Boom Patrol Detachment. So the idea is that you sneak into a harbour, you plant limpet mines, and then you bugger off again.
Yeah.
And he persuades the powers that be, Mountbatten, at Combined Operations, that this is something that should be created.
I mean, he's a man of tremendous push and go, isn't he? That's
and charisma.
And charisma and twinkly blue eyes and one of those fellows who, there's this amazing in Salzburg, there's this amazing I am Major Hasler, the officer said softly before asking a series of questions that made no sense. This guy Sparks, Bill Sparks. Can you swim? Yes, sir. Do you have experience with small boats? No, sir. Are you married? No, sir. And basically that's because Hasler are looking for unmarried men who possessed a fighting spirit, natural intelligence, resourcefulness, self-reliance. But basically, if you're unmarried, you're in.
Yeah. If you're married, forget it.
Because that's the kind of outfit he's putting together, and that's the kind of mission he's thinking they're going to be going on.
Yeah.
That they're not coming back from. I mean, you're off to a good start.
But right from the word go, it is Bordeaux that he's thinking of.
Yeah.
And the reason he's thinking about this is because Bordeaux lies sort of 60, 70 miles inland on the River Gironde. And the River Gironde is this huge, really wide estuary that flows out into the North Atlantic. And it's quite wide for quite a long time. And then it narrows, but it's quite deep. So it's got quite a decent-sized port.
Yes.
And for all sorts of reasons, it's quite difficult to, you can bomb it, of course.
Yeah.
You can try and bomb it, but that's very difficult because it's a lot of flak there around Bordeaux for obvious reasons. But you can't send in MTBs, motor torpedo boats or motor gun boats or anything like that. It's too well protected. And there's some 30 Kriegsmarine, German Navy vessels there of various sizes, frigates, motor launches, S-boats, all that kind of stuff. And so it's an absolute no-no. So the only way you could get to Bordeaux is by something like a kayak or parachuting in or whatever. And that's the big issue. And so Hasler comes up with this idea. And the reason Bordeaux is important is because it's quite a major port. Because it's quite far south, it's sort of, it's a little bit further out from the blockade with the Royal Navy blockade. It's harder to police.
Bordeaux, this is a consequence of the strategic earthquake, after all. The Germans have access to these ports and facilities on the French coast that they otherwise wouldn't have. And this is all part of the consequence of the strategic earthquake. It's the Royal Navy in particular is looking for answers to questions it never thought it was going to have to find answers to. Because the idea was you contain the Germans, they don't have access to Brest and Bordeaux and all these deep water and the Atlantic ports, all these deep water facilities that they can then run the Battle Atlantic from. So you can see why Hasler's part of a picture of people trying to find ways to come up with answers to this, because no one had done any thinking along these lines before, is the truth. Because, even 2 years after the summer of 1940, they're still scratching their heads as to how to actually bring this sort of thing about, aren't they?
Yeah. And for some reason, it's a port where they receive a lot of rubber, which, of course, everyone needs in the Second World War.
Yeah.
Both sides you need for wheels and tracks and all the rest of it. Where would that rubber come from? Would that be coming from sort of Africa?
I don't know.
Vichy French Africa, somewhere like that,
maybe.
I guess.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
because the Germans haven't got any possessions.
Or from the Japanese,
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, so it's rubber. They've got 25,000 tons of rubber coming into Bordeaux between June 1941 and June 1942, which I suppose that's quite a lot, isn't it?
Well, if you can create a situation where they don't get those 25,000 tons coming in, then that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and for the price of 12 good men and true, maybe.
Well, that's clearly part of the calculation.
So it's very much so. Hasler gets a go ahead. He's the commanding officer, and Captain J.D. Stewart is the second in command. And there's 34 of them. They're all volunteers, and I don't think he was shy about stressing that they were going to be doing dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
To be fair, so I think everyone they didn't know what they were getting themselves into, but they knew it was going to be quite fruity.
Yeah.
And they practice in South Sea.
Yeah.
And they start, and Hasler comes up with a plan for Operation Frankton on the 21st of September 1942. Or rather, he doesn't come up with it then. He submits his written plan. And initially, this is just 3 kayaks. So that's 6 men, two men by kayaks. And these kayaks are foldbots, so they're fold-away canvas boats, about 11 foot long.
Yeah.
But they're an earlier model called a Cockle 2.
So they can be deployed from a submarine.
Yes.
That's why you need a folding boat, right? Because you need to be able to get it in and out of a submarine. Because otherwise, you'd probably go in something more sturdy.
But I tell you what, that there's quite a lot of things to sort of clunk about. So you would make them up making them up in a submarine. I think would be pretty tricky.
Yeah.
You've got to make the shell. You make the sort of skeleton first.
Yep.
So you lay out the canvas as a sort of rubber base on the rubberized canvas at the bottom, on the bottom half. And then you start fitting all the kind of struts and, the ribs and all this kind of stuff. And you add to it. And at the end of it, you've got a boat which is 2 foot wide or whatever and 11 foot long.
Yeah.
I mean, the narrow confines of a submarine, you've then got to get it out because you can't assemble it on deck at night.
No.
So you've then got to pass it up through the
conning tower.
You can see why there's sort of scope for quite a big cock-up.
Well, yeah. And what we're talking about here is the business of assembling the boat and getting it out of the U-boat. We are not yet on the water.
Correct. But anyway, that's the idea of the foldboat. And the foldboats they're using are Cockle 2s, which is why they're eventually called the Cockle Shell Heroes. But the 1956 book of the same name, and as the film, obviously. And so that's the original plan. And they're going to paddle by night, hide up, lay up by day, and take 3 nights to get there. And then they're going to plant a ton of limpet mines on boats, blow them up, set them a timer so they can get away, sink their boats, and then walk from Bordeaux to the Spanish border. And, over the time that we've been looking at the Second World War, we've come across some pretty harebrained plans.
Yes.
Let's face it.
Yep.
The plan for the Ponte Grande.
Well, Colossus.
Fustian, Colossus.
I mean, Colossus includes a walk 60 miles to somewhere else through enemy territory to meet
Chastise.
I mean, Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Chindit 2.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Chindit 1. I mean,
Chindit 1. Let's just stick with Chindit 1. There's some pretty harebrained ideas.
Yeah.
But as you're saying this, it's 6 men. Every part of the plan has to work for it to work.
Yeah. Well, and the times where we've talked about those things, what happens is None of the parts of the plan work.
Anyway, so what happens is that Mountbatten gives the green light on the because Mountbatten is of course the commander in chief of Combined Operations. He gives the green light on the 13th of October and insists on increasing the number to 6. He tells Hasler that he can't go as commander. Hasler, blows a hoolie and chucks his toys out of the pram, and he relents. So they've done some training. They've done some training on. They've gone from Margate to Deptford. Yeah, which is sort of similar sort of size, and the plan is to launch them in December. But should we take a break now?
Well, let's take a break. But just before we do, Hasler uses 4 points to persuade Combined Operations to let him go.
Right.
He says, first of all, it was an important operation with a good chance of success, but only Hasler has the small boat seamanship and navigation skills needed for such a mission. So you got to pick me, boss.
And Mountbatten's persuaded by this.
Yeah, any failure would prejudice all future operations. The commanding officer is duty-bound to go on a new unit's first operation if he wanted to gain his men's respect. And if he was barred from this one, he asked, what type of operation would be permissible for him to go on? After all, had not Major David Stirling accompanied many of the SAS's missions? And that he takes those arguments to conference, and Mountbatten says, much against my better judgment, I'm going to let you go. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, what a pushy man he was. We'll take a very, very short break and we'll come back to find out. I mean, you all know what happens next, but it's the detail of it is extraordinary.
Do you, though? I mean, for those who don't, there might be some people out there who've never heard of Operation Frankton.
Yeah, exactly. Won after a ding-dong battle, as he said in his diary. See you in a tick. We'll be back after the break.
This podcast is brought to you by AT&T Fiber with All-Fi. Something tells me that the guy watching sports for 13 hours straight on Sunday, who then stays up watching the recaps of those 13 hours, then calls his friends to talk about it, is definitely going to notice that half-a-second delay.
Get AT&T Fiber with All-Fi and watch sports any time of day from anywhere in your house. Live like a gigillionaire. Limited availability in select areas. Go to att.com/hypergig to check eligibility. Coverage may require extenders at additional charge.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, where James and I are talking about Operation Frankton. The cockleshell heroes. Blondie Hasler has just persuaded Lord Mountbatten to let him go on his mission. So he's chosen crews.
He has, but he's also chosen what they're going to take, because obviously one of the problems with a Fulbert is that you can only take a limited amount of stuff. Yeah. Should we go through what each cockle is going to carry?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
2 men, 8 limpet mines, 3 sets of paddles, 2 hand grenades, 1 repair bag, depth sounding reel, fishing line, waterproof watch, water and rations for 6 days, plus a spanner to activate the mines and a magnet to hold the cockle to the side of the ship while putting on the mines. So the total load is 480 pounds, which is in new money is 220 kilograms. What that tells me is they are seriously under-defended. So the only thing they've got to defend themselves is 2 hand grenades.
Yeah, I know. No pistols.
No stun gun.
Obviously, the idea is that you don't get in a fight, though. You're not getting into any fights.
Yes, but there's a huge amount of assumption that everything's going to go according to plan, isn't there? That's the problem.
Everything is going to go according to plan because Blondie Hasler's got it all worked out.
Yeah. Even though he's the only one who's ever done anything like this before.
Well,
and he hasn't done it for this, but I mean, this kind of level of seamanship.
Yeah. So
he splits them into 2 teams.
Yes. Himself and Bill Sparks, who we encountered earlier on in Catfish. So there's A Division and B Division. Corporal Albert Laver and Marine William Mills in Crayfish. And one of the things about these names is if you're shouting, oi, catfish or oi, crayfish, and you only hear the fish bit, these names are already not, surely one should be called red, green, names that you cannot possibly.
Yeah, confuse,
right? I mean, it's just my immediate thought glancing at these.
Angels 15, bandits incoming 12 o'clock.
Exactly. They're differently categorized, aren't they? Yeah.
Well, it's completely clear. You can't, the whole point is that you can't confuse it.
Yeah, exactly. But catfish, and then Corporal George Sheard and Marine David Moffat in Conga, right? And I get the fish names, fine, but you could go salmon, trout, Conga, and then there's 3 very...
And then, yes, exactly. Then Grayling, Place, and...
Exactly. And then it goes on. B Division is Lieutenant John McKinnon and Marine James Conway and Cuttlefish. Sergeant Samuel Wallace and Marine Robert Hewitt in Coalfish. Marine W.A. Ellery and Marine E. Fisher in Catchalot. and there's a reserve Marine Norman collie.
He never gets off the sub.
He never gets off the submarine, and I imagine, God knows how he felt.
Pretty relieved.
Well, but also relieved, but also you'd want to go, wouldn't you? You'd want to go.
You'd want to go.
If you're one of this little gang, these 12 guys, you want to go, don't you? That's why you're doing it. Anyway, so they depart Holy Loch in Scotland on the 30th of September.
November,
sorry. And HMS Tuna, another fish name they could have used, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Dick Rakes, DSO.
I mean, you could have minnow, couldn't you? Shark.
Exactly. I just think, we're not, obviously these men are phenomenally brave and incredibly driven, and what they're taking on is beyond my soft-handed comprehension. But just that little thing of these names not being clear enough, although as we're going to see, there's lots that goes awry. Anyway, so they surfaced 10 miles from the mouth of the Gironde, and obviously the submarine's being careful. And now the Navy will be going, we're not going any closer. No way. No way. That ain't happening.
Not into that choppy sea at the mouth of the estuary.
Exactly, right? So they surfaced 10 miles from the mouth of the Gironde. Cachalot's hull is damaged while being moved out of the stub, so it has to stay behind. So immediately, the thing we were talking about, getting the folded, assembled, loaded, and out of the submarine.
And listen, you've been on a submarine. You've been on a submarine, haven't you? I mean, there are loads and loads of things to bang your head on.
Yeah.
Or snag the underside of your rubber canvas.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just see how this would have happened. You really, really can.
And I imagine that Hasler's accepted the doubling of the size of the force. All right, we'll build some redundancy in. So there's some redundancy being played out. If he thinks he can do it with 3 kayaks, well, he's going to have to, and he's been given 6. He's going to have to do it with 5 now. So he probably thinks we're still good. We're still golden. We've still got enough people to pull this off because I only needed 3 boats.
Yeah, and we should say that the whole point of doing it in December is so you have really, really long nights.
Yeah, although the problem with that is there are really, really, really long nights and the weather's terrible.
And the weather's terrible. It's really cold and, the water's cold by then. So if anything goes wrong, they haven't got dry suits in those days.
No.
I've just got a cap comforter and a jolly good smock and, roll-on neck jumper.
Did suit you, the cap comforter, Jim, in the picture you sent?
Yeah, no, it's a good look.
It's a great look. Were you wearing dry suits?
No, we were wearing wetsuits, but I think we were wearing dry suits in Scotland. The wetsuits are a bit of a nightmare, to be honest, because, you get warm and everything. But end of the day on Saturday when we were doing our capsizing exercises, I mean, I should just tell you about this because it's so you have to go, okay, 1, 2, 3, over you go. And
so Ben would go, preparing to capsize. 1, 2, 3,
capsize on my number, 3, 2, 1, go. Exactly, all that kind of stuff. So I'd say, Roger Skipper. It's very funny. Anyway, so then you get in the water and you're sort of gasping a bit. Then you've got to attach your paddle to the side of the fulbert.
Right.
First of all, that's the first thing you've got to do while treading water.
Yeah.
And all your kit.
So it doesn't float off.
Yeah. Then you've got to duck under it and put your head into the space where your bum was.
Into your roll. Right, yeah.
Yeah. And then on Ben's instructions, you go 3, 2, 1, turning to starboard. So I was like, so that's towards the far bank. Pause. Yes, I think so. No, we did it. We managed to do it the right way. And then you've got to get onto it. So how to get onto it? Okay. So the person at the stern gets in first.
Yeah.
Guy on the rudder. So that's Ben.
Yeah.
So I have to get onto the bow, and I have to straddle I have to cling onto the end of the bow and straddle my legs onto either side of it.
While he gets in.
Like a monkey.
Yeah.
So a monkey grip while he gets on.
Yeah.
And then you have to pull yourself up the bow.
Right.
Because you've got to keep really low. Low profile is the key to getting in. So you basically have to crawl along the kayak, basically until my head's in Ben's crutch, which is kind of an interesting moment.
I mean, you're both tall, aren't you? That's the other thing.
Yeah, but also, I'm a big unit. And so you've then got to kind of drop your legs in and swivel around and hope that it doesn't capsize again. You start all over again. I mean, it's
alive.
So Theo beside me is just looking at the picture I posted earlier of me, because that's just me capsizing. That wasn't the drill, but it's quite a thing, and it's a big enough thing that and it's just right at the end of the day where we've been kind of fighting all these winds and waves and tidal clashes and all the rest of it, and it's freaking knackering. It really is tiring, and you're just going, I can't even begin to think what I'm going to do if I've got to do this again.
God.
Anyway, that's by the by. But as you say, 53, not 23.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, the average fella back then would be, I don't know, 6 inches shorter than you.
Yeah, much lighter, and have
lighter.
38-inch waist, chest, and only weigh kind of 9 stone 11.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the 5 kayaks, because we've lost catch a lot. So we've lost one of the kayaks that doesn't have fish in its name, so that the opportunities of confusion can continue. 5 set off at 7:30, 1930 hours on the 7th of December. Although there's some debate about that, right? About when they actually leave.
Yeah, exactly when they leave. But whether they left at 1936 or 1822, I don't really care.
Yeah.
They left on the evening of the 7th. That's all that matters.
Yeah. And there's wind, tide,
crosswinds, and there's the Gironde coming out into the sea. That's a problem. So you've got the flow of the river,
giant river current,
and the tide coming in. So obviously they've timed it so that they go in with the tide. That's the whole point. So the tide carries you.
Yeah. But
there's still a clash where the river meets the tide, and they encounter kind of 5-foot waves. Well, that's I think that's about a force 5.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit stronger than it was when we were out there the other day.
Yeah.
But we were doing it in daytime, and it was quite sunny, and the water was quite warm because it's October.
Yeah.
They're doing it in December, the place they've never been to before, in the middle of the night.
I mean,
it's a totally different kettle of fish.
I mean, so much of this comes down to, obviously, time spent on reconnaissance is never time wasted. It's the old adage, isn't it? And there is no reconnaissance.
There's no prep. There's prep, but there's no reconnaissance.
You can't do any reconnoiter for this. So that's the case with basically all of these combined operations raids that go down. All the different varieties is that, no, they don't really know where they're going. And so there's that kind of gumption over reconnaissance as your attitude, isn't there?
Yeah.
And famous before Colossus, before the Trojano aqueduct, Admiral Keyes, says, what a terrible waste, as he says goodbye to them.
Yeah.
And it's that. And actually, funny enough, right? I mean, old school listeners will be delighted I'm about to do this. But when you look at one of the problems in Arnhem, is no one knows the lay of the land in the town. They've looked at it on maps, but they've got no understanding, no recce. There's no recce. So they don't know where the railway cutting...
Or how steep it is.
And they've seen high ground on a map.
Yeah.
So they're thinking in terms of dealing with the high ground that's on the map, but they don't really know how the street layout works for you, or what position it puts you in. And this is the risk of these kind of essential special operations things where recce is impossible. Yeah. And you can have as many aerial photos as you like, but they have not. I mean, they have not walked the ground in advance.
No.
I mean, it's
no.
And this is what they're immediately up against. So coalfish disappears.
Yes, and also it's from the kayaking point of view, that is clearly the toughest single bit is getting into the Gironde from the mouth of it. But you've already done 10 miles from the submarine, and let's say kind of 9 miles out, you hit this. I mean, that is an absolute shocker.
Yeah,
at night. I can completely understand, even with skilled people. And also the other thing is they've only been doing this since July, rather.
Yeah.
So they've done lots of training. Of course they have. But it's not like they've been doing it like Hasler since he was knee-high to grasshopper. They've
also not, the winter training they've done. It's not like they've had a winter to do winter training. They haven't had a previous winter in which to...
And they don't have dry suits. And, they've got, whatever they've got. I don't know what they're wearing, but it's not the same. It's not as good. Yeah, so coalfish just completely disappears.
Yep.
Conger capsizes, and they can't get it, as they try and turn it back around again, they can't get the water out of it enough. And the waves are too rough. So, so catfish, which is Sparks and Hasler, tow them for a little bit.
Yeah.
Till they're kind of into the mouth of the Gironde, where the waters die down a little bit.
Yeah.
And gets them kind of so they're kind of near to the shore. They then scuttle it, and he goes, right, make a break for it to the shore. But, what happens to them is they then die of hypothermia. And then the water the water is coming in. So one of their bodies gets swept to the Ile de Ré. So they assume that they've just been drowned, but they haven't. They've actually died of hypothermia. And again, you can completely understand that. I mean, on Saturday night, after we had our dunking and everything, it was a cold, bitterly wind and everything.
Yeah.
And I spent the whole evening just feeling absolutely cold to my
core
bones. I couldn't warm up.
Yeah.
And the others were saying the same thing. They just hadn't. It took ages to just get you going again.
Yeah.
And of course, they're in just soggy wool and, and all that kind of stuff. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that they die of hypothermia.
Yeah.
But that's what happens to them. So now that's 4 down because they've got 2 still on the boat, on the submarine.
Yeah. So they get into the Gironde.
And they make about 20 miles, which is quite good.
Yeah, it's pretty good going. But in theory, once you're in the river, if you're not going to get as bad weather, out on the sea exposed, the Gironde at least is not as exposed as out in the ocean.
No, the tide would be taking them. And when it calms down, they would be going at kind of sort of 5 or 6 knots.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can see how you'd easily do that in 5 hours.
Yeah.
So they reach a place called Saint-Vivien du Médoc. And they've also had to navigate, haven't they, some enemy boats.
See some frigates and stuff and sneak past them.
Coalfish reappears.
Yeah.
They have actually made it. They've just lost contact, but they've made it. And they land a little bit further away at Pont de Grave Lighthouse.
Yeah.
And as soon as they do, they're picked up by the French.
Yeah.
By the gendarmerie.
Yeah.
Who immediately hand them over to the Germans.
Big shout out to the gendarmerie there. Well done, lads.
Bastards.
Nice day at the office. I mean, and of course, the thing to remember is the commando order has happened by now.
Yep. So,
and even though they've no pistols and no commando daggers, which after all, the dagger is supposedly the thing that that's the outrageous part of being a commando, isn't it? As far as the Germans are concerned, as far as the Hitler's concerned, they're shot because of the commando order.
A few days later, in a wood just north of Bordeaux. Yeah, which I always find absolutely amazing because they do this with all the guys. The first glider operation when they're going to Norway in October. Is it October? No, November 1942. October 1942.
Yeah.
They're all shot in a wood north of Oslo.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Germans don't like shooting people in prisons, but they take them to a wood, shoot them on the kind of on the sly where no one's looking and no one notices.
Well, because it says that even though there is a commando order, that even though they've made this order clear, they know it's a bit dodgy, and there's some nacht and it's sort of nacht and nabel around things, isn't it?
Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? And they bury them in the woods. It's just grim.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, maybe we should one day get someone. Maybe we get Chalky in to talk about that glider operation.
Yeah. But what's his name? Ray Mears. He did it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and he went and ate berries, didn't he? In the tundra, basically Norwegian. Anyway, carry on.
Lee, the aforementioned Lee, he's done Operation Muscatine.
Has he?
Yeah.
Oh.
He paddled into the fjord, then he went over the glacier, down to the hydroelectric plant, came back again.
Blimey.
That's a trip. That is a trip. Yeah.
Wow.
Just saying, it's a good one to do.
Yeah. Now you're into it.
Yeah. So there's only 2 left now. There's only 2 left. There's catfish and crayfish. So that's Hasler and Sparks. And crayfish is Laver and Mills.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of seas, aren't there? A lot of seas, a lot of fish.
Yes, exactly.
So the second night.
But they've been, I mean, the thing is you didn't get much sleep because of the cold. So they've not been getting a lot of sleep, have they? That's the thing.
Like, you light up during the day, but how much are you going to go have someone on guard, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's it, isn't it? So someone's got to be on picket. Although you can't defend yourselves.
It's good, but you just got to keep a watch out, haven't you? But it can't be more than kind of 4 hours max in 24 hours, can it?
Yeah.
Anyway, the second night they paddle further. There's not much around, and they managed to do 22 miles, and that's all okay. And the third night they paddle a further 15 miles.
And then the fourth night, only 9 miles because there's a really, really strong tide.
Yes, so the tide is going back. Is going out by this point because, of course, obviously it's not the same every single night. You're working against. It's sort of changing, isn't it? How long does the tide take to go? It's like 8 hours, 9 hours.
They move, they shift, don't they? So they sort of come back an hour later every. You'll have a high tide at noon, and the next day it'll be at 1, and then 2.
Okay, so it's 13 hours or whatever.
If I remember rightly.
Okay, but whatever. The point is, it's not the same every single night, so it does shift, which is why you would find yourself by the kind of third night, you'd be fighting the tide rather than going with it. And so they were originally supposed to launch the attack on that night of the 10th, 11th of September, but he changes it to the following night because of that tide, because they haven't made enough progress and they're just knackered. And so that means they've turned up. They're within spitting distance of Bordeaux too late to be able to do what they want to do.
They haven't got the puff to do it. Yeah.
They haven't got the puff to do it, but also they're just too late. They're running out of hours.
Yeah.
So they lay up short of Bordeaux and go and attack the following night. And the idea is to kind of move out into Bordeaux in the kind of early evening when it's, once it's completely dark and try and start laying your limpet mines around 9 p.m. Hasler splits them into 2. So he's on the left-hand side of the harbour. So that would be the north, I suppose. And they attach 8 limpets on 4 different vessels, including a German patrol boat. And at one point, a guard comes out and shines a torch. And it looks like they're absolutely in the beams, but for whatever reason, he doesn't seem to see them.
And it's Bill Mills' birthday.
Yeah. Bill Sparks.
Yes. No, sorry, yes. And Sparks says goodbye to Bill Mills, who with Ellery was his closest friend of the unit.
Oh, right. And Bill's is his birthday.
This is in Saul's book. It would be a belated birthday celebration for Mills, who would turn 21 in just 4 days. Sparks and Laver were 20 and 22.
Jesus.
Blondie Hasler was 28. So, they're young and up for it, is the thing. But anyway, there's another thing that goes wrong, though, isn't it? Because, yes, they place 8 limpet mines, a cargo ship and a small liner.
And Laver and Mills do the same.
And they damaged 6 vessels, and it's all good. But, unfortunately, and this is one of these things where you think, what?
Yeah, how can this be?
How can this possibly have happened?
Yeah.
SOE are also in town that night to do pretty much
the same thing. But from the land.
Claude de Brissac coming by land rather than coming in a extremely daring and difficult and challenging and risky way. Because of the secrecy around stuff, no one, Combined Ops don't know that SOE are doing this. SOE don't know that Combined Ops are also in town. And he hears the explosions.
Going off in the early hours.
And aborts. I think it's absolutely amazing that they've reached. And obviously, one of the things
on the same night.
And if Hasler had gone the night before, if they'd felt fit enough, then de Brissac wouldn't have been turned up in Bordeaux to bomb things.
So what happens to de Brissac?
I'm not sure. I don't know. But it's the most. It's just it's the most amazing cock up, isn't it? And obviously, one of the things we talked about is that at the beginning, that what is the Special Boat Service during the war, and this is one of these products of there are loads and loads of private armies, and little gangs, and people setting up their own little ops. And then if you're good at the chat, if you can get yourself to Mountbatten, make your case, you'll get a check written for one operation and see how it goes, see how it works out. And there's a lot of suck it and see going on.
Yeah,
and this I think is a perfect example of where that leads you. Which is there's no one office who knows everything that's going on, which I think...
Because after all, this isn't 2 complete Lancaster crews.
Yeah, as we've talked about before.
So maybe it's just worth the punt. That Hasler guy is a bit mad. He's a bit full of himself.
Yeah.
Reckons he can pull it off. End of the day, it's one submarine and handful of kayaks, which cost,
Yeah, well, the submarine is the expensive part, which is why it drops them 10 miles out to sea.
Yeah. But, if it comes off, great. If it doesn't, well, we've lost 12 men.
Yeah, exactly.
And a handful of kayaks. Anyway, the bottom line is they do the limpet mines all blow up.
Yeah.
They don't sink a single boat, but they do damage lots.
Yeah.
Which is quite annoying. And also it's that whole thing that now the Germans know that they can get there in theory.
Yeah.
So it's undermining it. So you are sort of expecting to be a kind of mini Pearl Harbor, but it doesn't quite work out like that.
Although that then means that the Germans now know they're going to have to guard Bordeaux more intensively, which draws people away, creates chaos, undermines the Germans' feeling of security and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, tactically, there's no question that it's a worthwhile target. And, what it achieved, I think, was worth the... Well, I don't know, it's hard to say whether it's worth it, isn't it? But it wasn't as if it was a dud.
No.
I think that's what I'm trying to say.
No, are you saying it's 90% successful?
It's an old meme, but that'll work.
To coin a phrase. So anyway, so then they done their explosives, they damaged the boats, and then they have to, now the bit where, then we'll simply walk to...
Yeah, and they split up again.
Yeah.
They go off in pairs. They sink their full-boats sort of 400 yards apart.
Yeah.
All the best, chaps. See you for last orders and Blighty, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And off they go.
Yeah.
And Hasler and Sparks reach the border town of Ruffec, which is 100 miles away on the 18th of December, which is, that's pretty good going, really, sort of 20 miles a night. But, of course, Laver and Mills don't. They get stopped at Montluard by the gendarmerie.
Who hand them over to the Germans.
And what happens to them? They're executed, as were McKinnon and Conway.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 die of hypothermia, 6 are shot, and 2 make it. Wouldn't you know, it is Hasler that makes it.
Blondie Hasler. I know, that's the really extraordinary thing about it, isn't it? It's that,
So they're taken in by escape line leader Mary Lindell and her son Maurice. and they meet up at the Hotel de la Toque Blanche
Yeah.
in Ruffec. And then they're hidden in a farm for 18 days, waiting for the right moment to cross the border. And at this point, I should say, combined operations assume the whole lot have been killed.
Yeah.
They've heard nothing.
Yeah.
And it's not until the 23rd of February that I think by which time he's got to Gibraltar that he makes a signal to, Hasler makes a signal. Says, can you come pick me up, please?
It is amazing that he survives.
Well, I don't think it is amazing that he survives. I think it's reasonable that he survives because he's the best trained by some margin.
Yeah, that's true.
He knows what he's about. He's a little bit older.
Yeah.
He's been around the block a bit. He's fought the Germans himself. He knows everything there is to know about kayaks. If you're going to do this mission, it's people like Hasler that you need. And I would say the problem is all the others aren't like him.
Yeah.
They haven't got that kind of sixth sense and that they haven't got that kind of understanding of boats. And I still think the hardest part of all is actually just getting to Bordeaux. That is a seriously tough paddle.
But again, if we're looking at it in terms of it's less than 2 Lancaster crews, in terms of strategic effect, what does it do to the Germans in their defence of Bordeaux? Do they then amp things up so they spend loads
I can't find that much about that. I'm sure they must do. They must ramp it up.
Yeah.
Because they know that it's been partially successful because they heard a German communique saying that 5 boats have been damaged in a raid by saboteurs and they've all been executed.
Yeah.
Caught and apprehended and executed, which is another reason why the British think that they're all being killed. But I don't know. I don't know what I think about it really. This is all part of that kind of set Europe ablaze, isn't it? It's undermining. If you're talking to Tom Petch, who's been doing all that work on deception operations,
yeah,
I think he would say this is part of it. This is what it does. It undermines the confidence of the defenders. It means it sort of prompts greater paranoia. And let's face it, the Nazis are pretty paranoid anyway. It's absolutely bonkers, isn't it?
I find it very hard to sort of because at the other end of the scale, I suppose, is the Saint-Nazaire thing. Where you do a spectacular, right?
Yeah. Go the other way around.
Go the other way around, where you do it in full force, turn up and you smash the place up rather than come and go by stealth.
Yeah,
it's a very, very strange one, which doesn't, how brave these men were and how tough they were and how determined they were and how, all those sort of things. You can't take that away from it, but it feels so harebrained because of just the sheer difficulty of the physical task. I think it's telling that they're so exhausted they have to put the thing off by day.
Well, it's partly that, but it's partly they've just run out of time. Because run out of time in the night. They haven't got the time because you've got to go in, lay the limbic mines, then get back out again and get safety before they blow.
But that's because the actual paddling is getting harder and more difficult.
Yeah, and it would do because they'd be short of sleep and and they're working against the tide and all that kind of stuff. And that last bit, it narrows. So I suppose does that concentrate the tide? I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I'll have to ask Lee next time I see him.
Probably runs faster, yeah.
But if you look at the aerial map of the Gironde, it's much, much narrower in the run up to because it's quite deep there as well still because you have quite decent ships going in. So I guess that's suddenly kind of more water.
There's a great quote from Bill Sparks, though.
What did he say?
As they pull up alongside the cargo ship. We could hear the crew singing, remembered Sparks. I wondered what they'd be singing in a few hours' time. It proved to be an easy target. I attached my magnet holder to the hull to prevent the tide from carrying us away. The major placed the first mine on the 6-foot rod and lowered it into the water, placing the mine on her stern. He detached the rod, having felt the limpet mine clamp itself to the hull. I released my magnetic holder and the tide slowly swept us along, so we could place another midships and a third on our bows. It's complete James Bond stuff, this.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And I think that's what's so fascinating about it, but also,
it's time for a remake, I think.
It's hard to call, isn't it? What really to think of this?
Yeah, massive hats off for them for doing it. Accepting that we're all over 50 and we haven't really done it before, it is hard work. And I can see that doing that in those circumstances, it's just a totally different caper to doing it in Devon when the sun's out and the sea's calm. That little taste on Saturday afternoon we just had where the sea got a bit choppy and we were kind of fighting tidal flows and river flows and all that kind of stuff. You suddenly think, oh my God, it's one thing when you've got the tide with you and you've got the flow with you, but
when are you off to Scotland for this?
Saturday the 28th or something like that. And then the next day is assembling the boats.
Right.
And we start on the Monday.
Well, we'll all be thinking of you, Jim. Thanks everyone for listening. By the way, on the Patreon, last week we did the sort of equivalent of a reply all emails thing where we posted all of the talks from the festival They will be coming out in more of a sequence than just one big dump.
Yeah.
If you are a Patreon listener, the We Have Ways Patreon has all the talks from the We Have Ways Festival Die coming. They're not all going to be there in one big lump because it'd be too much for you to do, and none of you get anything done, and you'd get sacked from your jobs and stuff. We don't want that. That wouldn't do. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening. Good luck, Jim, with your paddling.
Yeah. Well, I'll see you before then, but yeah. See you tomorrow, actually, because we're talking to the Great Escaper.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. We've got to watch it as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you all very soon. Cheerio.